Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiteshanu bemitzvotav, vetzivanu ad debri Torah. Blessed are you, eternal, our Elohim, sovereign of the universe, that has sanctified us with your commandments and has ordained us in respect for the studies of your word of the Torah. Blessed be your name forever. Shalom Ahim. This is your servant and friend, Roy Ephraim Jaime, from Bethel, Pennsylvania, bringing you today's Shabbat, AliYAH number 7, from Parashat YISRO, found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 18 through 26, by Dr. Roy Carlos Reyes, International Ministries, Restoring the House of Israel. Today we will continue from yesterday's 6th AliYAH, mentioning the fourth last words given to Moshe to give to Yah's people. But first, I will ask a question. What should we remember Shabbat? Again, why should we remember Shabbat? When the Eternal spoke the 10 words audibly from the mountain, he said that the children of Israel should remember the Shabbat to keep it holy and not to do any creative work. The reason is that the Eternal himself did all the work of creation in 6 days and ceased his creative activities on the 7th day. The Eternal, therefore, is the example to follow in remembering and keeping Shabbat. All the children of the Eternal are obligated to rest on Shabbat, which is the 7th day of the week, not another day. Sunday was introduced as a day of rest by the Constantinian system based on the cult of sun worship. Christianity has adopted that system as part of its foundation. However, the Eternal does not change his laws, and it cannot be said that Sunday is Shabbat. The commandment to rest on the 7th day is still in effect today and will remain in effect until the heavens and the earth pass away. Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 through 19. The one who remembers the Shabbat is recognizing that the Eternal is Adonai over creation and over time. The one who does not keep the Shabbat does not respect the Creator's authority over creation and is not imitating him in his personal life. He who remembers the Shabbat to separate it from the other days of the week will be sanctified and will receive the blessing which is reserved only for that day. Shabbat was given to man in order to be able to dedicate himself to the Eternal in a special way and is a means to be able to develop intimacy with him. As it is written in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, verse 13 and 14. If for the Sabbath day's sake you turn your foot away from doing what you please on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of Adonai honorable, and honor it, not following your ways, nor seeking your pleasure, nor talking about your own affairs, then you will delight in Adonai, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth, and I will feed you with the inheritance of your father, Jacob. For the mouth of Adonai has spoken. Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. Do not commit adultery. It is about being unfaithful in the marriage covenant through a sexual relationship with a third person. Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 32. With that act, the pact is broken. The punishment for adultery is capital punishment. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10. The 8th word, thou shalt not steal. Here it is interpreted as a prohibition against kidnapping a person, since in Leviticus 19:11 there is another commandment that prohibits death or stealing in relation to material goods. The punishment for kidnapping is capital punishment. Exodus chapter 21, verse 16. Here it refers not only to the thief of objects or the stealing of objects that do not belong to us, but also to kidnapping. In addition, this word is also used to refer to fraud and snare. Ninth word, Exodus chapter 20, verse 19. Do not bear false witnesses against your neighbor. First of all, it refers to not only not testifying falsely against a person in a court of law, but it also involves not saying things against one's neighbor to other people, and generally not lying. One of the most serious forms of bearing false witness is when a person says something in the name of the Eternal that he has not spoken. That crime deserves capital punishment. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 20. False witness leads to the destruction of society. It causes the innocent to be punished for something they didn't do. It also allows robberies, murders, and oppressions to be committed and then escape punishment. He who testifies falsely brings destruction to the world. In Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15 through 21, it is written, not one witness shall be raised up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin he has committed. The case will be confirmed by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If a false witness stands up against a man to accuse him of transgression, the 2 litigants shall appear before the Eternal, before the priests and the judges who are in those days. And the judges will investigate thoroughly. And if the witness is a false witness and has falsely accused his brother, then you shall do to him what he intended to do to his brother. Thus you will remove evil from among you. The rest will hear and fear, and they will never do such evil in your midst again. And thou shalt have no mercy, life for life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. In Psalms 34, verse 12 and 13 says, who is the man who desires life and wants many days to see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. In Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19, it is written, there are 6 things that the Eternal hates, and 7 are an abomination to him. Proud eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises evil plans, feet that run swiftly towards evil, a false witness that tells lies, and one that sows discord among brothers. In Proverbs chapter 12, verse 22, chapter 19, verse 5, verse 9, chapter 25, verse 18 is written, lying lips are an abomination to Yahweh, but those that do carefully are his delight. The false witness will not go unpunished, and the one who tells lies will not escape. The false witness will not go unpunished, and the one who tells lies will perish. Like a mace and a sword and a sharp arrow is the man who bears false witnesses against his neighbor. Gossip and slander is one of the most harmful evils and is capable of killing a person, as it is written in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 16. Thou shalt not be a slanderer among thy people. You shall do nothing against the life of your neighbor. I am Yod He Vav He. In Proverbs chapter 10, verse 18 says, he who conceals hatred has lying lips, and he who spreads slander is a fool. At Revelation chapter 21, verse 8, verse 27, it is written, "But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the abominable, the murderers, the immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars shall have their inheritance in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death, and nothing unclean shall ever enter it. The new Jerusalem, neither he that practices abomination and falsehood, but only those whose name are written in the Lamb's book of life." When we talk about false testimony, it refers to false accusing someone. It also applies to knowing that someone is being falsely accused and not doing anything about it. The chief leaders of Yahshua's time committed this sin by bearing false witnesses against him. Matthew chapter 26, verse 59 through 61. The chief priests, the elders, and the whole Sanhedrin sought false witnesses against Yahshua, that they might put him to death, but they did not find him, despite the fact that many false witnesses came forward. Finally, two came forward and declared, "This one said, I can tear down the temple of Elohim and rebuild it in 3 days." Let us go to the 10th word, Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 17, which says, "Do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his maidservant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor." Greed is wanting something that belongs to someone else. It is forbidden to make any attempt to obtain something that belongs to another when one wishes to possess it oneself. It is forbidden to convince someone to sell something they did not wish to sell by means of pressure, even if full payment is given. The desire to have the things of others can lead to violence and murder. 1 Kings chapter 21. The act of desiring something that belongs to someone is called greed. David, fell into this sin when he coveted the wife of Uriah the Hittite, which led him to get rid of one of his most loyal men in order to keep his wife. We find that in Shemuel, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 14 and 15, where it says, "When morning came, David wrote a letter to Joab, which he sent by the hand of Uriah. And in the letter he wrote, saying, Put Uriah in the front in the thick of the battle, and withdraw from him, that he may be wounded and die." Entering the seventh AliYAH, the whole village sees the voices and the torches, the sound of the shofar, and the smoking mountain. Then they tremble and keep their distance. They ask Moshe that only he speak to them, not Elohim, so that they do not die. Moshe tells them not to be afraid. Elohim has come to lift you up, and so that your fear will remain in you, so that you will not sin. The people kept their distance, and Moshe approaches the dense cloud where Elohim is. The people have seen what Yahweh has spoken from heaven. That is why he cannot make a god of silver or gold. They will have to make him an altar of earth to sacrifice offerings of ascensions and peace. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will visit every place where he will remember his name, and there he will bless the people. It is not allowed to make an altar of stones and chiseled carved stones. You cannot climb the altar on steps so that nudity is not seen. Let us begin breaking down the scriptures. Exodus chapter 20:18 says, "And all the people saw the voices and the flames, the sound of the horn and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw this, they trembled and stood at a distance." This event was so great and sublime that it caused great fear in the town. This was the first holiday of Shavuot that the people of Israel experienced. A similar event occurred at another Shavuot celebration. It was the one recorded in Acts chapter 2, in which the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, was poured out on the believers in Jerusalem. These manifestations are very similar to those that occurred in Acts chapter 2, when the Spirit of holiness was given to the bride. The Hebrew text says that they saw the voices and the flames. In Acts 2, it is said that the flames of fire came and spread over each of them and began to speak in different tongues. Let us continue reading. Exodus chapter 20, verse 20. Moshe said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Ha Elohim has come only to test you, and that respect for him may always be with you, so that you may not go astray." The fear caused by the presence of Yod He Vav He was so great that the people did not want him to speak to them, but to speak directly to Moshe. That is why Moshe tells them that they had witnessed this in order that reverent fear will always be in them. And verse 23 says, "And do not go up by steps to my altar, lest your nakedness be uncovered upon it." This commandment teaches us to cover our legs when we minister to Yahweh. Since here we are talking about the private parts, but about the legs especially. Exodus verse 20, verse 26 says, "And do not go up by steps to my altar, lest your nakedness be uncovered upon it." Here he does not refer to the nakedness of the man's member, since the priest wore linen underpants. Exodus chapter 28, verse 42, "But of the nakedness of the legs." Out of respect for the altar, bare legs cannot be shown. How much more respect should we now show people and not expose our bodies to them? This also teaches us the importance of covering our bodies when we are serving the Eternal. Let us now look at a fragment which has been adopted to the concept of the Hebrew roots and which shows the exegetical relationship of the Hebrew marriage covenant in a prophetic way. The Hebrew wedding, a prophetic act. Let us rejoice and rejoice. Démosle la gloria, because the time has come for the wedding of the Lamb, and his girlfriend has prepared herself, fine linen, resplendent, and clean, that has given to him to wear. Fine linen are the righteous works of the Kadoshim of Yod He Vav He. Israel. The Malach, the angel, said to me, "Write, how blessed are those who have been invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb." Then he added, "These are the very words of Yahweh." Hitgalut, the book of Revelation, chapter 19, verse 7 through 9. Marriage customs in ancient Israel consisted of two stages. 1a, Kiddushin, which is the marriage or engagement. And B, marriage. It is well known that in the East, the parents of a young man were the ones who chose his bride. The custom is established in the Torah since ancient times, in the time of our fathers. This was practiced for the simple reason that the bride had to become a member of the groom's family or tribe, and so the whole family was interested in knowing whether she would suit or not. There is an evidence that at least the son or daughter should be consulted. Rebekah was asked if she wanted to go to be Isaac's wife. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 24, verse 58. This type of custom has been changed even after the Babylonian captivity, giving the young man the opportunity to choose his bride for himself. It was natural in the first century Israel that men should be the ones who would seek out their bride personally and not the young woman for the male. The rabbis teach that since man was formed from the dust of the ground, Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, and women from man's rib, Genesis 2 verse 21 through 24, man tries to seek his wife, his rib. Look for what was lost. Similar to what Yahshua says, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. Luke chapter 19 verse 10. This is clarified in a timely manner in AliYAH, Matthew chapter 15 verse 24. I have not been sent except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The young man had to have sufficient means to give a marriage dowry, which could be money, jewels, or property. When the man has the dowry, negotiations for the bride begin. The man's father calls a man who acts as an agent for him and his son. This agent is the friend of the bridegroom. Johanan, John chapter 3, verse 29. Johanan, the immersion, was a typology of the friend of the bridegroom, of Yahshua, the agent who by means of the Tevilah, of Teshuvah, by water, was preparing a people willing to Yod Hey. This agent had to be perfectly informed about the dowry that the young man could pay for his girlfriend. In the same way, the bride's father was to call his agent. At the time when the agent of the two parties met, the negotiations were formally carried out. They were to consent to the young woman hand and agree on the amount of dowry that the young man should pay for the bride. This thing about agents or friends of the groom was widely practiced in the Hebrew history and culture. They served as mediators for the couple, and even at the wedding feast, they brought gifts to the couple and served them. These witnesses guaranteed that both the bride and the groom had fulfilled what was offered in the engagement. After this, the woman accepted the proposal voluntarily, and the friend passed the answer to the man. Today, the woman goes through a tevilah, or ritual bath, to enter under the authority of the bridegroom. Shemot, Exodus chapter 19, verse 10. The event is announced with a blow of the shofar. Shemot, Exodus chapter 19, verse 16. The bride leaves her house to meet the bridegroom, verse 17. The bridegroom leaves his place to meet the bride, verse 18. The two enter to the first step of the Hebrew marriage covenant, called Kiddushin, which means sanctifications. When the two sanctify each other, they consecrate and set apart for each other. At this moment, it can be said that they are tied to each other. This is why this step is also called erusin, from the verb aras, and to bind. These friends of the groom are typology of the government of the Kahal of Israel, which is set up by Yod He Vav He to prepare his people for the encounter with their king and savior, the Mashiach. Rabbi Shaul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2, "For I jealous you with zeal for Elohim, because I married you to one husband to present you as a pure virgin to the Messiah." The betrothal, the Keddushin, is considered a covenant. Among the ancient Hebrews, betrothal was a spoken covenant. The prophet Ezekiel presents Elohim as marrying Jerusalem, as it is written in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 8. Again, I passed by you and looked at you, and behold, your time was a time of love, and I spread my cloak over you and covered your nakedness, and I swore an oath to you and entered into a covenant with you, says Adonai Yod He Vav He, and you came to be mine. After Israel's exile, betrothals included a written document or ketubah, which is a marriage betrothal, which was signed. This teaches us that the first ketubah corresponds to the two stone tablets given to the people at Sinai. The ceremony was performed as follows. The families of the bride and groom would gather, sometimes including a few other people as witnesses, representing each family or the couple, friends of the bride and groom. He was presented with the ketubah, or contract of engagement, that contained the Torah, the sacred marriage contract between Yod He Vav He and Israel. In this Torah were the benefits and obligations that both the bride and the groom had. This illustrates Israel's spiritual union with Yahweh at the moment when Moshe leads the people, which the bride, right, to meet her husband, Yod He Vav He, at Sinai. Tehillim, the book of Psalms, chapter 68, verse 7 and 8. This document was signed, and the groom gave the bride a gold ring, or, failing that, an object of value. With this, he said, behold, with this ring you are reserved for me, according to the law of Moshe and Israel. For the Kehillah, this ring is represented in the tablets, which the bridegroom gave as rules of commitment and parameters to follow and live in this marriage. Yahshua established it. In Johanan, the book of John, chapter 14, verse 15, says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. This commitment was sealed at the moment when they both took the cup of wine as a seal of the covenant, representation of the blood that is shed to seal the covenants, and which reminds us of the moment at the Last Supper, the meal of preparation a day before Passover, in which Yahshua makes a covenant with the disciples who will become his emissaries. Matthew chapter 26, verse 27 and 28. And Mordecai, Mark chapter 14, verse 22 through 25. Luke chapter 22, verse 18 through 20. Shemot, Exodus chapter 24, verse 4 through 8, which says, and Moses wrote all the words of Adonai, and he got up early in the morning and built an altar and 12 large stones at the foot of the mountain, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent the young men of the children of Israel, who offered burnt offering and sacrificed calves, peace offering to Adonai. And Moshe took half of the blood and put it in its bowls, and the other half of the blood he poured out on the altar. Then he took the scroll of the covenant and proclaimed it in the ears of the people. They said, we will fulfill and obey all that Yahweh has spoken. Then Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, saying, behold, the blood of the covenant which Adonai had made with you over all these words. With this cup and with this signing of the marriage contract, the pact, the covenant, was sealed. With this type of communion, the covenant and the communion with Yahshua is accepted, agreed to and confirmed, that we live holy lives and fulfill what Yahweh commands us in his Torah. In the same way that happened with Abraham at the moment he returned from the battle of the 5 kings, when a man named Melchizedek, which was a typology of Yahshua, king of Salem, as Jerusalem is now known, priest of the Most High, appeared to him. By approaching Abraham, he made covenant and fellowship with him, bringing bread and wine. And Abraham gave Melchizedek the tithes of everything. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 14, verse 18 through 20. Ivrim, Hebrews chapter 7, verse 1 through 4. This is confirming the covenant between Elohim and Abraham. After this, the bridegroom promises the bride that will prepare a place for him, the promised land, and separate room in his father's house, or a separate house, just as Yahshua promised us that he will prepare a place for us in John chapter 14, verse 2. Then they say goodbye, and the bride returns home. While she waits, she must guard herself and remain a virgin until the appointed time for the wedding. The waiting time can take anywhere from the 6 months to a year. Many times, brides go through a ritual of washing in water called tevilah. Her maiden garments are changed to the garments of an engaged woman, and a veil is put on her so that anyone who sees her knows that she is separated for a special man. This custom can be interpreted as typology of the veil that Judah has until her husband returns. Among those of the house of Ephraim, it is not so. We were outside the covenant, cut off from Israel, and in parched dead men's bones. This is until our Redeemer comes into our lives, gives us good news, washes us in the waters of Tevilah for the new birth, and we are introduced to the covenant with Israel. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11 through 19. The wedding, when the wedding night of the Lamb comes, the bridegroom dresses in the best, like a king. If he was rich enough, he could wear a gold crown. Otherwise, she will carry garlands of freshly cut flowers. The groom's dress was perfumed with frankincense and myrrh. His belt was made a brightly colored silk, and his sandals were carefully adorned with ribbons. This preparation of the bridegroom has been described in the prophecy Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 61, verse 10, which says, "With all joy I will rejoice in Yahweh. My soul will rejoice in my Elohim, because he has clothed me with garments of salvation. He has covered me with a robe of righteousness, as the bridegroom and the priest are splendidly dressed, and as the bride is adorned with her jewels." The adornment of the bride was an expensive and exquisite affair, which took a long time to prepare, 2,000 years. He put all his effort into making his face shiny and lustrous as of polished marble. David's words illustrate this in Tehillim, the book of Psalms, chapter 144, verse 12. The dark locks of her hair were always adorned with gold and pearls. She was adorned with very precious stone and jewel that the family had inherited from their past generations. This is not seen much today in groups of Jewish women living in Western cities, but we do see it in the Yemenite Jewish women. Brides from poor families borrowed the jewelry from their friends in marriage festivities. Especially the bride's dress was always remembered and had a lot of significance. The prophet Jeremiah makes this reference. Is the virgin forgetting her garment? or the bride her frowns? Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 32. The Apostle John saw the new Jerusalem ready as a bride adorned for her husband. Hitgalut, Revelations chapter 21, verse 2. The marriage procession, the bridegroom leaves with the bride from his parents' house where he comes to look for her, as in the parable of the 10 virgins, and a large procession follows to her house. The streets of the city in those days were dark, and it was necessary for lamps or torches to be carried. Tehillim, Psalms 119, verse 105. The whole of Psalm 119 speaks of the Torah, verse by verse. Guests who did not go to the bride house are allowed to join the entourage on the way, and the whole group goes to celebrate the wedding feast. Without lamps or torch, they could not join the procession and were not allowed to enter the groom's house. The lamps were made of clay with a large hole for the oil and a small opening where the wick was placed, which was a piece of cloth moistened with oil. They were carried on wooden stakes. According to the rabbis, these lamps signified the covenant that Elohim made with Abram, that like the stars of the heavens, so would be his descendants. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 15, verse 5. Like the light of the world that came upon men and was poured out as a drink offering, it was put on a stake to light the way of men who are on their way to the marriage of the Lamb. The bride, when she went to the groom house, left her hair loose, floating, and her face covered by a veil. There was joy and joy on the way. The guests placed in front of the bride and groom branches of palm trees and myrtle as a procession for kings. This reminds us of the moment when Yahshua made his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Johanan, the book of John, chapter 12, verse 12 through 15, and Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 9. In the procession, there were men playing drums and other musical instruments, as well as people dancing along the way. It was an occasion of great joy. The most important moment of all the marriage festivities was when the bride entered what was to be her new home. Since the bride and the groom wore crowns, the psalmist must have captured this moment in a king's marriage in Tehillim, the book of Psalms, chapter 45, verse 14 and 15, where it says, "She shall be brought to be the king in embroidered garments, virgins after her. Her companions will be brought to you. They will be brought with gladness and gladness. They will enter the king's palace." After they have arrived at the groom's house, some of the older women take on the task of fixing the bride's hair. Its floating locks are hidden under the veil. From this point forward, custom dictates that his face not be revealed in public. You are led to a place where there is a canopy or a huppah cover that is located inside the house or outside. The bride's place is next to her husband, where together they will hear 7 blessings given by one of their parents or by persons of preeminence. In the case of the wedding of Cana of Galilee, for example, Yahshua was the most prominent guest in attendance, and he would certainly be asked to pronounce the blessing upon the newlyweds. Johanan, the book of John, chapter 2, verse 1 through 11. The wedding party, every guest attending a wedding party is required to wear a wedding dress. In AliYAH, Matthew chapter 22, verse 1 through 14, Yahshua gives an illustration of the feast and the wedding garments in relation to Israel. And in verse 1 through 6, Yahshua reveals Israel's history of disobedience in all its ages by consistently ignoring its commandments and ordinances, and how they are disciplined. Verse 7 through 9 shows throughout history how other nations take power over them, and even prophesy the destruction of Yerushalayim by the Romans in 70 AD. However, it reveals the redemptive purpose that would be carried out among all the nations to which they were taken. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 21 says, "And thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith Adonai Yod He Vav He, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, whither they went, and will gather them from everywhere, and bring them into their own land." Verses 11 through 14 shows that the wedding garments is related to the obedient faith that the believer has manifested towards his commandments. This is confirmed by Matthew chapter 5, verse 19, where it says, "Therefore, whoever takes away one of the least of these commandments and teaches men will be called very small in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches them, the same will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." The wedding banquet was presided over by a coordinator or a maestrasala. Johanan, the book of John, chapter 2, verse 8 and 9. This person was in charge of taking care of the preparations and the development of the party. He took care of the guests and gave orders to his servants to carry out all the details related to the wedding. The Hebrew expression, "sons of the bridal chamber," used by Yahshua, Matiyah, the book of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 15, refers to those invited to the marriage feast. This expression was used more in Galilee than in Judea. The maestrasala, which was the one in charge to the guest, gave thanks for the meal and pronounced the blessing at the appointed moments. He also blessed the Eternal for the fruit of the wine. During the meal, joviality prevailed, and guests were expected to exalt the bride. There was no religious ceremony at the festival, only the blessings of relatives and friends were made. The blessing of the wedding agent of Ruth and Boaz is a good example where we read in Ruth chapter 4, verse 11, which says, "And all the people who were at the gate, together with the elders, said, We are witnesses. May Yahweh grant you that the woman who is going to enter your house may be like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel, and who will become strong in the Ephrathah, and your name will be famous in Bethlehem." After the party was over, the now married couple were taken to an apartment called Talamo to be in private. The marriage feast lasted a week, as it does even among the Orthodox Torah keepers, in the same way as the Feast of Sukkot, which is Tabernacles, also called the wedding feast. Shofim, the book of Judges, chapter 14, verse 17. The couple's celebration days lasted a full month, which was 30 days. When our Mashiach Yahshua returns in a Yom Teruah, and our encounter with him in the clouds take place, all of us who will attend such a precious and long-awaited wedding will be gathered. And then let his kingdom be established here on earth, and he will sit in the same place where his father David sat. Whoever reads should understand Elohim's relationship with Israel. Elohim meets Israel at Sinai and makes a covenant of spiritual union with them. Shemot, Exodus chapter 19, verse 8 through 17. And B. Israel ratifies the covenant. Moshe writes the law of the covenant and erects an altar with 12 columns representing the tribes. Burnt offerings are held, and the blood of the sacrificed animal is sprinkled on the people. Blood of the covenant. Shemot, Exodus chapter 24, verse 4 through 8. And C. But Israel breaks the covenant with Yahweh by going after idolatry, and Elohim divorces them. We see this in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 32, and chapter 2, verse 1 and 11, and chapter 3, verse 1. However, the prophet says, Hosea chapter 1, verse 10 through 11, anyway, the people of Israel will be as many in numbers as the grains of sand in the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. So the time will come when instead of being said, Thou art not my people, it shall be said unto them, Thou art the children of the living Elohim. Then the sons of Jehudah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together. They will appoint a leader themselves, and they will come out of the earth, because that will be the marriage contract, the Torah price that is paid for the ransom of the scattered and expatriates of Israel. His life, his blood. Massa, Acts chapter 20, verse 28, and 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18 and 19. Revelation chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. Revelation chapter 5, verse 9. And 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20. And chapter 7, verse 23. It should be noted at this time, hoping that all brothers who begin their studies of Parashat, weekly Torah portions, can have clarity as to the resources used by our ministry, which is mostly based on scripture itself, giving the historical, cultural, and idiomatic focus that the Hebrew roots provide to prophetic questions and allow us to see more clearly the revelations of the two houses of Israel, Ephraim and Jehudah, the oneness of Yahshua as the Creator made flesh, the promises that belong only to Israel, as well as the legitimate observance of all commandments that the house of Ephraim can keep in the dispersion. However, the reader and student of Torah is not necessarily required to agree with such beliefs, although will help in the restoration of all things. May Yahweh bless you, and this concludes today's Shabbat, number 7. Prayer has been a help, and that you have a wonderful Shabbat. See you. Shalom Aleichem.
With mercy, you lead in righteousness, you whisper to war through spirit and faith. Yeshua, my rock, I bless your name. You sit on a hill, and your voice makes me whole. Each parable deeper than silver or gold. With dust on my feet from the path that you tread, I carry your teachings like daily bread. Yeshua, my rabbi, my heart says yes. You teach with mercy, you lead in righteousness. You whisper to love through spirit and faith. Yeshua, my rabbi, I bless your name. Oh, High, the shame I do not. The gates are open wide. You are the rabbi, the shepherd, the guide. Truth in every lie. Yeshua, my rabbi, my heart says yes. You teach with mercy, you lead in righteousness. You whisper. עוד לא תמה התקווה, אור חדש זורח מציון. דבר אדוני עומד לעד, מה שנאמר יקום ויהיה. The hope is not ended yet. A new light rises from Zion. The word of Adonai stands forever. What was spoken will surely come to pass. Im kanisa tashavet, שקט יורד על הארץ. שבת שלום מביא האור, זיכרון ועבדך יחד, בן דוד יבוא בענן, ישוע ומנוחתנו. שבת שלום מביא האור, זיכרון ועבדך יחד, בן דוד יבוא בענן, ישוע ומנוחתנו. שבת שלום ברימונה, לבבות שבים אל הבית, מה שנכתב